Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic. I am jazzed and ready to talk some Battlefield, and today we have a question from Zanu on Twitter about the specialists, more specifically the balance of the specialists themselves. And as we were talking about before we started recording, there's some interesting things on that. So let's jump right in. Okay, I last time after we finished recording, I think that's the first time we've said that. We were talking about how frequently we say, "Oh yeah," before we started recording. Yeah. We were talking about how we play the specialists, and usually it's like two specialists that I use. Most recently, it was Liss, and before that, it was McKay, I think. Yeah, I think it was McKay. Even with all of my my qualms with McKay, it was still him. that terrible, very toxic relationship with that guy. But yeah, we're talking about how usually there are only two ones, and I really loved how you described how do you play Battlefield with the specialists.
Yeah, well, for me, I have two modes. One is I want to be speedy boy and just get around quickly, and if that's the case, I'm using Sundance. Maybe every now and then I'll use McKay to sort of, usually just like if I'm sniping, just getting up on a rooftop or something like that. Or if I want to play, more objective based, then I'm pretty much playing Falk, and they're really the only two that, I'll use other ones every now and then, like once every 50 games maybe or something, but for the most part I just play the two main for me, which is Sundance and Falcon. Yeah, it's something I hadn't actually really thought about until you raised this question, or Zanu, you raised the question, that it's a bit of a weird like balance at the moment, because I think most people are in that same boat where I don't think that many people would be using like 5 to 8 specialists, you know what I mean? I think everyone kind of has their own, which is like, in most games that's the case anyway. It's not like it's the end of the world, but it is just kind of, I don't know, it kind of feels like that's not productive to the game, I guess. I don't know. It just feels like the point of the specialist was to give us all a bunch of different ways to play, yet we're still, it's almost like we have less classes now, because,
it took away options.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very interesting topic that I literally had not thought about until we started recording. But yeah, there's some weird elements to it that I hadn't thought about.
It is very, very strange that we've done 47 episodes of this podcast, and we're just now getting to the point where we're having this discussion, because it's like it's true. Like, I never even had that thought, because I can probably count on one hand the times I've played Dozer and the times I've played Naveen Rao. Actually, not Naveen. I went on a stint with Naveen, and I really enjoyed playing his play style. But Casper, I've only played a handful of times. Dozer, Sundance, I can't play Sundance very well, so I see everyone using them, and I just can't really... I can't get the hang of it, but I understand the usability that specialist offers. Constantine Angel, I think I've only played him twice, honestly. And then Jisoo, I've only played once, I think.
I'm pretty much in the same boat with all of those, I think. I haven't really... For me, Angel, it's weird because Angel's like one that, maybe not so much now, but like before the last few updates, he was like, everyone was using him. I've probably got 2 games with him, I think. Like, the way I see it is like, if I'm going to play that playstyle, I'll just use Falk and run an ammo crate. Like, it's they're the exact same if you think of it that way. So yeah, I think there would be a pretty similar spread across the board in the whole community, that there are a lot of them that just don't get used, with the exception of, like, both of us just said we don't use Angel, and he's probably one of the more used ones, at least like earlier on in the game. But
yeah,
people like Dozer, and I don't see Dozer. I just you see him like once every 10 games, you'll see one of them, and that's pretty much it. So I would be curious to see like the stats on who's the most played and all that kind of thing, because I never thought about that there really has become like a meta. It's not really a meta in the way that like you have to play Falk to be good at the game. That's not really none of them are overpowered, but it's more just like there's just certain play styles that people enjoy, and it's almost a bit like people just want the class system. Like people are just picky. There's like,
there's
Sundance
nothing
and
really
McKay
drawing
are probably
you
the
to
ones
one.
that are a bit more aggressive, maybe like the assault class, and then there's like Falk and Angel who are the medic class, and in previous games they were already the most played, so it's probably just like people pick the class or pick the specialist that they, I guess, tie to the class they used to play the most, and then just stick with them.
Yeah.
And so it's just left us with 9 other characters or 8 other characters that you just don't really use. So
yeah, I think it's indicative of it's like the Incredibles quote: everyone's special and no one is, except for the fact that pretty much no one is special except for Sundance and McKay and even Falk. Really, like those are the only 3 ones that have something really special to them that is more usable in the everyday gameplay. Because like I've been enjoying lists, but I suck with the controlled rocket launcher. It is so unwieldy and it's so disorienting how they set it up for switching to camera views. By the time that I understand where I am, I'm at 40% and I can't do anything. So it doesn't even work if you want to shoot in a straight line, honestly. Like it doesn't work that way. So I think I'm going to ultimately go away from her play style, honestly. But like the other ones, McKay, really interesting. He's got a grapple hook. And then Sundance, they have a wingsuit, which is really cool and adds a lot of different traversal options and just the ability to get around the map much quicker, especially on something like the new map. So, and then you've got Maria Falk, which, like you said, the support class was the most popular in previous Battlefield games. It continues to be a popular choice because of how similar that playstyle is, and I think Maria has a good playstyle that suits a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's a good point that you brought up that like all the ones you just mentioned, they have abilities that you can kind of just use all the time. So with Sundance and McKay, like you can just constantly get around the map better than everyone else. And then with Falk, you can either be healing or reviving teammates, but also healing yourself. So every time you get shot, you can heal yourself. Whereas a lot of the other specialists, they're a bit more niche. They don't really, it's not like their abilities are bad. It's just like you might only use them once per life. Whereas if I'm playing Sundance, I'm probably using the wingsuit like 10 times before I die. If I'm using McKay, I'm probably using the grapple hook 10 times before I die. So, I think that's maybe why they're a bit more popular, because they feel more useful. It's not that they necessarily are, because a lot of the other specialists do have really good abilities, but it just doesn't feel like you can. And it's not to do with like the cooldown times or anything, because you can kind of use them all at the same pace, but it's more like they're just not as they're just not as usable in game. For example, with Lisa's rocket launcher, it's not like there's always a tank there, you know what I mean? But with McKay, there is always a building that you can probably get to a better spot than you are currently. So I think that's probably a big part of it. Whether they can do anything to balance that, I'm not really sure. It's not like it's unbalanced from the perspective of like those characters are better. It's just you can use them more often. That's really the only difference. So it's not even that it really needs balancing. It's just like the way that it's set up. It just makes them more appealing, I guess. So yeah, that's maybe something they didn't really think of, that there are just specialists that are just more more
it's more that
reliable
they
and you can
needed
use it.
that specialist number than it is like, oh, let's add something very unique
Yeah.
to this character. They aren't special, which is the problem. Is they don't have anything that makes you want to play them. Honestly, like even I mean, when Jisoo was announced, we were all like, oh my gosh, he's got the wall hacks, you can see through everything, blah blah blah. And like, how many times have you seen a Jisoo on the map? Like, not really all that much, right?
No, you probably see like, one a game, but even then, it's just not. Yeah, it's not as good as we kind of thought. And same with so many of them. Same with Dozer's shield. It's like, it's handy, but I don't know. I just feel like it's not as usable as most of those other abilities. So, yeah, it's a weird situation that until literally right now, I had not even thought that there are specialists that are way more usable, and they're not better. They're just more enjoyable, and I guess you get better use out of them because you can use their stuff more often. So yeah, it's a weird situation, and it's a really, really good topic because we're like a year after the announcement of the game, and we're only just like, oh, hang on, this is kind of weird.
I think we found the real problem with specialists. Wait a second here. What are some of the ways that you think they could fix this problem? Because it's a deeper issue than just like, oh, like you said, they're balanced in terms of other specialists, in terms of how they play. What are ways that they could make it more enjoyable for people to play these different specialists? And the dice, I think, immediate response is just make the other ones weaker. It's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's not down to like, I don't know, Dozer sucks so no one uses him. It's more just the play style. So I don't know. I'm really not sure you can fix it, if I'm going to be honest. I think it's just the issue with this system. They need to put them into classes and make it so that the specialist is always going to be there. That's something that I think the community just needs to understand. That they're built into the game. They will never get rid of them, but they need to, put them into classes or do something. Lock gadgets behind, even if they're not in classes, but like Falk can't use a sniper or something, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just to make it so that if you want to play Sundance, for example, but you can't use a sniper, then it's like, oh, well, I won't play Sundance then. You know what I mean? Which I don't necessarily agree with, because that's something that I actually really like about these changes is the ability to use whatever weapon you want with anyone. I think I actually think that's a really good change, and I think even if they went back to the class system, I think having like universal weapons is it has pros and cons, because I do get that also. If you see, like, say in Battlefield 5, if you see a medic, they don't have a sniper. So I do think that's like helpful, but I also think it's me playing Sundance, for example, with a sniper. That's not really like hurting anyone.
Yeah.
So it's got pros and cons, but I do like that freedom. But if it's going to make the specialist a little bit more balanced, then maybe something they could look at. I don't know. It's a tough one. I really don't think there is a fix for it. I honestly think this is just like how this game's going to be, and then the next one they just need to do classes, because this is the way it's going to be. And again, it's not like it's the end of the world. I don't really care that I don't play the other 8, but it's more like if there was just 2 other classes, if I play 2 classes and then there was 2 others, I'd probably be willing to try like play those a bit more. But because there's 8, it's like I just don't want to play those 8. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's more changes to like their availability with certain weapons and certain gadgets than it is their specific abilities? Because I think something that they tried to lean heavily on was those different abilities. But I think most of the people in the discussions around it is like, oh, hey, we more have an issue with the availability of weapons than we do with their actual abilities.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think like slightly tweaking some abilities and stuff. For example, like Casper, like who actually uses Casper. He's
yeah.
pretty pointless.
The whole point of Battlefield 2042 and their gigantic maps makes Casper's ability useless.
Yeah, he feels the most irrelevant to me. He's good for like when there's the challenges that are like get 25 spots. It's like, okay, I'll just play Casper for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Finish that. But I've never just gone, you know what? I feel like sitting in a drone and not shooting anyone and just sitting there looking. I've never thought that. So I do think some tweaks to certain abilities, like for example, Casper, maybe Dozer, like I don't know what they could do. I think the shield like suits him, but I don't know if they can make it somehow better. I definitely think some like tweaks to the abilities would help as well, but I do think it's more to do with locking gadgets and weapons, and even like, which I don't know if this is the right move, but even making you can only have say 2 of each specialist in a squad or something. I think limiting it to 1. So if someone else has Sundance and I want to play Sundance, that's annoying. So I'm not all for that, but just something along those lines, or maybe not even within the same squad, but within the whole team. There's only X amount of one specialist that there can be, or something. I don't know.
Almost like how Apex does it. I think that would be more interesting if they had more specialists. Almost, I think having a platoon or a squad. Hopefully, they have platoons. Like you can have more than 4 people in a squad. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But just say, even if it isn't, you just say, hey, 4 people. You can only have 1 of each person, and that forces you to try out these different characters because you have to use something that you may not be used to, but that requires them to be a lot more up to date on how these characters are balancing with each other, as well as the abilities and how strong each of them are in pairing with each other. So I think it's an interesting discussion point to say, hey, what if they did limit how many could be in a squad? I think that would fix a lot of the issues that we're finding with it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird situations because there's almost just pros and cons with either way. Because then I think if you go, each class can only have 1 of each specialist, pretty much how it is in Hazard Zone. Then there are also some negatives that come with that like, what if all the other specialists aren't that good and all the ones I like are taken, then I'm just like stuck with Dozer, and it's like, this isn't fun. So it's kind of, it's a bit of a double-edged sword that it could help the game. It could also really not help the game. So I don't know. It's a very, very delicate situation, I think. It's like, no matter what they do, I think there's always going to be some downside to that. And I think that's why the class system was so sought after by the community, because that's just proven to work. And it's not like I don't think the specialist system, like I prefer the class system, but I don't think the specialist system is like as bad as people make it out to be. I think it's just a little bit worse than the class system, but it's also, if it's a bit worse, why don't we just go back to the class system? So
it's
I don't
flawed
know.
in ways
a tough
that
situation.
It's flawed in ways that the classes never were. And I think that's what a lot of people pick up on is like, I don't see why we should be doing this. It's like, we're trying something new. It's like, but there are other ways to try something new and be innovative within Battlefield, as we've seen in the past iterations of it. Each one has something interesting to it. And I think there are ways that you can innovate within a first-person shooter, specifically in the Battlefield franchise, where you can still keep the heart and soul of it and the class system and still innovate. But
for example, stuff like the plus system and all that, like those are the changes we wanted. That's one of the best changes in Battlefield history, I think. So they got some of it right. It's just that I think they went a bit too hard on trying to be a bit different. And it just, I will say, like, props to them. I do like that they try new things. It's something I like about Battlefield, that, I like Call of Duty, but it's the same thing every year. And I like that Battlefield is always a little bit different. But unfortunately, the last really the last 5 years, like they're failing more of these new things than they're succeeding with. You know what I mean? So it's a tough situation because I don't want them to stop trying to innovate. I do like that, but it's like every game they try 4 to 5 new things. 2 of them are okay, and 3 suck. And it's like at that point, it's making the game kind of worse. So I think maybe they just need to And this isn't going to fix this game, but for the next one, I think they really just need to go back to basics and still innovate, but just like do one really safe but smart innovation rather than we're going to just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And 3 of the things that we try, people will hate, but the other 2 might work, and that it just doesn't pan out well. So,
Yeah, I think like we've said many times before, it was doing something that no one really asked for, and people are like, how are you going to innovate without like trying different things? It's like you can innovate in different ways and still have a good result, like not trying to limit the amount of innovation that's coming from DICE, but it's still very indicative of the disconnects that they have with a lot of their community, that they went this direction instead of what they are originally known for. And again, development changes, studios change, games change, and they evolve, and that's good. But it doesn't always mean it's good for the players. And I think I definitely understand the issues and the delays and how they're trying to approach the changes to the specialists. Because like we've been talking back and forth in this episode alone, it's like, well, I'm not really sure what they can do, and they're so gung-ho on keeping the specialists in the game that it's like, yeah, I don't know how they can do that. Like, honestly, it's if they want each specialist to shine, and they may not, but if they want each specialist to shine and get some playtime and people to experience their ultimate vision of Battlefield, they need to do something more. But if they're perfectly fine with people only playing like 4 of the specialists, okay. But I think it's limiting to the fans on what they can do in the game, because instead of the 4 different classes and so many different combinations underneath that, you now only have 4 and a varying array of different weapons you can attach to them.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the specialists is that, like, because some people might be like, oh, well, if you have 4 specialists that you play and there were 4 classes, then it's still the same, but it's kind of not, because you could play a medic very differently than how I play a medic in previous games. You could have, because you kind of have that spare gadget. For example, with Falk, you don't have, like, everyone has the Surret pistol, so it's each class is a bit more focused on one playstyle, whereas with the class system, it's not like it was drastically different, but you could play a medic very differently than how other people play medic. So the same amount of specialists and classes being available doesn't really, like, it sounds equal on paper, but it's really not, because they're very much more niche in this game than they were in previous games.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like, tying it back to earlier, I really like the idea of having, if they do in the future go to a class game once more, I love the idea of having weapons that are available to each of the classes, but also weapons that are tied to the individual classes. I think that balance is a good learning point from their experiment with the specialists of like, hey, the idea is pretty interesting. The execution wasn't quite there. But if we take the idea that you can customize your specific playstyle with this different, like you have, this is what we imagine and balance for. But on the outskirts of that, we also have, oh, hey, you want to be a specialist, you want to be a healer with a sniper? Well, you can't have any sniper because that's what this class is for. But here's a mid to long range weapon that you can use that's similar to a sniper, but if you really want to have that full experience, you go with this other class. So it's almost kind of guiding you through the different classes that they have to get you to the right experience that you want.
Yeah, and that's somewhere that the specialist system being in classes could actually benefit the game by having, for example, Falk and Angel. They would both be in the, I guess, support or medic class, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, maybe Falk can't use the snipers, but Angel can. So you have you can play a medic type, but you have to play a little bit differently because maybe, and they would obviously have to work that out with the balancing, but maybe there's a certain reason that we can't use Falk with a sniper because of this reason and that reason. And so having almost different classes within each class that can use different weapons, that would then make it so that, in that situation, then I'd be like, okay, well, I want to play Falk, but if I want to snipe, I'll just play Angel, who's a little bit different, still kind of hits that same playstyle, but it's just slightly different, but I can use the sniper, so he's the one that right now I want to use, and then maybe later in the game I'll go to Falk. So that sort of thing could work. How they balance it, it's hard to manage, because at the end of the day, I don't see why Falk couldn't use a sniper, but that's obviously just an example. But yeah, if they can find a way to do that where it's every class can use any weapon, but within those classes, one specialist can't use a shotgun and the other one can't use a sniper, and you've got to sort of find that perfect balance. That could work. It's just whether they can, it's easy to say that on paper. It's just whether they can find out the actual balance. Yeah.
Well, they kind of do something similar to that with the specialist of, you can't have this one with this one a little bit in some of the gadgets. What is it? With lists, there's specific...
I think the M5 rocket launcher you can't use or something.
Yeah, there's something specific that's locked away from her as a character, which kind of gets away from her whole design, but because I think it'd be really awesome and super versatile.
Oh, man, imagine
if you could have
two
dual
rocket launchers. That'd be
rocket
sick.
launchers. That would be awesome. One you're going to suck with, and the other one you can do all right with.
Yeah. Yeah. I see why they did it, but it would be at least it'd be cool to have a portal mode where that's available or something. Cause,
nothing but rocket launchers.
Yeah, that would be. I think that would actually be it probably would, I think it's fair to do it, because I think it would probably be a bit overpowered if you can just shoot. You just take out tanks at will at that point, but
I see that as a good thing, though.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think if you could do that, I think I would be a least main, to be honest. Yeah, I see why they did it, but it would be very interesting to see that, actually.
Oh, I love it. I would love it. Now that we've kind of talked about our ideas of what we would do or what that could be done, what do you think they will do with the specialist changes?
Oh, that's tough. Jeez,
it's unpredictable because we're at the end of June and we still don't know anything about season 2.
Yeah,
or the next phase of the update.
The way that they're going with, we were meant to hear about this in March maybe or April, and we still don't know. My guess is that they won't do anything, to be honest.
Really? You think they're just going to set it aside?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the more that we wait and don't hear about it, I'm starting to get worried that it's we'd rather just focus on putting out good content. And, you guys really liked exposure and the new season, and people, to be fair, people do seem to like the new specialist as well. So maybe they've seen that and just gone, we can make, we'll try and make some better specialists so that it's a bit more enjoyable. I think that's a possibility. I wouldn't say I definitely think that's what they're going to do, but I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
Yeah. So you're thinking they went sneak 100 and they were like, oh, hey, we're going to work on these specialists. They release the update and then everyone's like, oh, hey, well, we know that they're going to be working on the specialist, so we don't have to offer any more feedback on it until we get the specialist. And then the next game comes out. You think that is such a DICE move? I could totally see it.
It's definitely a possibility. I think eventually it kind of depends on how long they support the game. If they keep supporting it, people will continue. Like right now, because we've got our hands full with the season, I think people are just like preoccupied. But maybe towards the end of this season, people will start being like, "Hey, hang on, you guys said you were gonna. Where's all this news about the specialist?"
Wait a second here.
Yeah. So I think I'm kind of like 50-50. I think there's a 50% chance in my head that, yeah, potentially they just don't do anything and they just double down and say, we hear your feedback and for the next game, we're going to go away from that, but we're kind of too deep with this game, so we'll just stick with it. Or I just think the easy thing is to just put them in classes, and I think that's the most they'll do, is just put them all in their classes that they're technically already in, and just lock gadgets and stuff like that. That's the most I can see them doing, which I think is like, I don't know, that's kind of the middle ground, so I can't complain. That's like halfway between what we want and what they want, and I think that's fair enough, because yeah, I think a lot of people expect them to just delete the specialist, and I think anyone who is a realist will go, no, they just won't do that. They're too
I think
closely
they tied the game too close to it technically to be able to just say delete and then copy paste classes.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate reality is they've sort of backed themselves into a corner that they probably even internally are going like, geez, it would be easier
I think
to
we're
just
going
have
too far.
Classes. So
guys, we can still turn back now. Keep on going. Are you sure about this? Yeah, keep on. Yeah, I can totally see the headline though of like, after deep consideration and continued testing, we are delaying our changes to the specialists, and while they may not get implemented into this game, we have taken the feedback into future iterations or future updates to the Battlefield franchise. Like, that's a super easy headline to make without being tied to it too heavily legally.
Yeah, and the other side of it is that, like, with Vince on board now, that's the only downside to having Vince, is that he's kind of made that system work in Apex, and I feel like he might actually, even though he's probably going to do a lot of positive for the franchise, that might be his downfall, like his one area that he doesn't do as well, because he might go, I've seen this work with Apex, so we're going to stick with it. And personally, I don't think that is
the dark side of Vince Zampella.
Yeah, that's the one thing I will disagree with Vince on, is that Apex isn't Battlefield; it's a different franchise. So that's the thing I'm kind of worried about, is that he'll come in and hear that feedback and stuff, but like we've said so many times, when EA tell him to change something, he goes, no, this is what I want to do. And I think in 9 times out of 10, that's a good thing, but I think there's a chance that he goes, look, the community wants this change, but I've seen it work and I think we can make it work, so let's stick with it. And yeah, personally, I don't agree with that, but I don't know, that could be something that happens, so we'll have to see. The longer we go without hearing about it, I'm just starting to think, oh god, they're not gonna do anything, but yeah, time will tell.
I can totally see it. I also like this meta kryptonite with the Vince Zampella superhero story we've been detailing over the last few episodes. He's great, but the only thing is he tries to put specialist or like these character-driven stuff in everything he makes. But I think also he has enough experience to know that not like this single approach isn't going to work with everything. There are tons of things you can learn from Apex, but I think there are tons of things that just won't work within a Battlefield franchise, at least in terms of a mainline Battlefield franchise, because I think that could be interesting in something like what Marcus Leto is working on. And I think they weren't quite ready to really double down on their position that they really wanted to do with this game, because this game almost seems like this is the spin-off game from the original Battlefield franchise where they want to do something interesting, but it's actually the mainline Battlefield game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. This feels there was all those rumors about like a Battlefield hero shooter, and this feels like that, to be honest. Even though it's kind of not like this is meant to be. It's Battlefield 6 essentially, but it's like it feels. Yeah, it just feels. I mean, look, maybe it is technically in their eyes a spin-off because it isn't called Battlefield 6. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is a little hardline type of game in their eyes. I'm really not sure, but it definitely wasn't marketed that way. This was marketed as the Battlefield, and so yeah, it's a weird situation because it does feel very much like a spin-off. And look, I think if this was sold as a spin-off, it would have been taken very differently. I think the state of the game, it still wouldn't have launched like well, but I think there would be a lot less hate because
people are like, oh, we don't have to worry about it because there's another one coming.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's interesting to think about that. That yeah, it could have gone very differently if they marketed it slightly differently than they did.
See, what they did is they messed up the timeline too heavily. They went from 1 to 5. And then they went so far into the Battlefield franchise future. I mean, from 5 to 2042, like that's a lot of Battlefields in between there. I guess they lost their way.
Maybe that's why it's so different because maybe they're from the future and they have actually made 2042 Battlefields, and this is why it's so different because that's how they are in the future. Maybe that's what's going on.
Tastes have changed in 2042.
Yeah.
In an alternate universe in 2042, people are getting Battlefield 1 and they're like, man, this is great. I'm so glad we didn't get Battlefield 2042 this year. As they huddle from bunker to bunker. It's fascinating, especially paired with like what we've been talking about, the idea of Marcus Leto's studio, the different hero shooters that have been rumored throughout the time frame of this game's production, as well as still. Also, I was going down memory lane a little bit, feeling a little nostalgic, and I went and watched all of the teases that they gave at EA Play, I think it was, on the level of destruction that the next Battlefield game was going to have. Yeah. Do you remember that? The whole thing with the face and the eyes and the building exploding and how many people that they could render at once.
I think the thing with that, though, that I actually think we as a community have kind of skewed is I don't think they actually said that was for the next Battlefield. I think that was actually showcasing Frostbite 5. And I think we... rightly so, because we just thought,
it was using Battlefield assets.
Yeah, so it was kind of just like a bit of a miscommunication on both sides, I think. I think they maybe shouldn't have done that. And then we also probably all... Because I remember I was the same. I thought like, hang on, where's that destruction? I remember making videos about that when the game launched. But I did go back and watch it around that time too, and I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure that was just like a Frostbite showcase rather than a Battlefield showcase, if that makes sense. Even though Frostbite is essentially Battlefield. Like, they don't really... I mean, Battlefront was, but there's not much else that uses... actually, technically, I think FIFA uses Frostbite. Could be wrong.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a weird thing to showcase. It does give me hope for the next game, though. That's the thing, is that they've shown that's possible. So now they know that destruction's such a... an important thing, and I don't know why, but I just have this weird suspicion, or I'm not sure what it is, that I have a feeling the next one is going to be Bad Company 3. I don't know why I think that. I just feel like they've done the mainline games, and then we've been calling for Bad Company 3 for so long. Yeah, and so they got that destruction there. Bad Company's known for its destruction, so. That's something I've always just kind of thought. I thought this game was going to be Bad Company 3 before we learned about it. Yeah. So I think I'm just always going to think the next one is Bad Company 3 until we get it, to be honest. I have no actual logic behind why I think that. It's just like, it has to come eventually, even though it definitely doesn't have to come eventually.
You know those Twitter posts where it's got like the candles around in the circle? Like you've got like Bad Company 3 in the middle?
Yeah. That's
time.
actually like me. Just that's my existence. Is I'm just walking around every day like, maybe the next one's gonna be Bad Company 3.
Yeah. I think the thing that really screwed over Battlefield 2042 was the engine shift. Speaking of the engine, like honestly, from all of the reporting that Tom Henderson did, it ultimately came down to they had this amount of time, and like 18 months of it was spent with the redo of Frostbite. And then the reason I bring this up too is because what is it? The next Call of Duty is switching engines, right? They're doing something.
They're having
like
a
that.
year off after. So Modern Warfare comes out. I mean, Modern Warfare 2 comes out this year, and then for the first time, pretty much ever, they're having a year off Call of Duty. So I think they're gonna sort of take that time to just shift to the new engine, which is what this game should have done. Because I do think the upgraded engine and stuff is a good thing. It's just that they did it probably at the wrong time, where they would they should have done it and given it the time. Because I think the engine now, like the game feels good now, and I think this engine, it feels like there's a lot less bugs and stuff than there were in previous games. The launch of the game, not so much, but I know you know from Battlefront 2 that like even when they had quote unquote fixed the game, every update introduced new bugs where that's not really happening in 2042. So I do think like the overall upgrade to Frostbite is a good thing for the future, but it's more like just didn't help this game, because then they had to essentially rush the game out. So they almost should have done that like when Battlefield 5 initially launched, and just really sort of locked into that. Then again, maybe they did, because I guess they technically started development then. So I don't know, but yeah, it's almost like this game just had to take the L for that to work, because I do think for the future that's like a really big. If we were just still on Frostbite 4, that would, it eventually has to evolve. So it's a good thing, but yeah, definitely hurt this game.
There's a lot more maneuverability is the way I'll describe it, but that's not really the word I'm looking for. In terms of they can take or turn off individual items, and that was something that Battlefront 2 needed desperately, but was not able to. And the whole thing, like, it was so limited, like, if you coded something a specific way and you didn't, like, have an out, like, the whole thing with star cards, they were number maxed with the amount of star cards they could add, so they could only adjust or change or replace the ones they had. They couldn't add anything new.
Yeah, same with like the game modes too. I remember them saying like we can only have 8 modes in the game. Like there's no possible way to put a 9th mode. We have to remove one to put the other one in there. So how that happens, I do not understand that. How you can code from the ground up and be like, I don't know.
You made the game, right? Like issues. How can you not do that?
Yeah. So I do think that's one thing that it hasn't happened for a while, but I know when the game launched, they vaulted Dozer's shield, and I was like so impressed by that, because that's something we have not seen before. Other games have done it, but with essentially anything EA in terms of shooters, they've never really been able to do that. So I think the changes they've made have been really good, and I think I do think if they take the time with the next Battlefield, everything is kind of set for it to be good. They've got the right people in place. The new engine seems like they've at least they've made one game with it, and they're a bit more used to it. It's not like it'll be their first game on this new engine. It seems like the next one, because again, it comes down to the people. So it doesn't matter how well it's set up. If they don't execute properly, it doesn't matter. But I think all the structure is in place for the next Battlefield to actually finally be a decent Battlefield that launches well. It's just whether they execute that or not. But you'd think with the people in place and surely what they've learnt from this game, you'd think that would be the case. But then we've been saying that for like a decade at this point. So I'm not falling for that trap again.
Not making any bets or holding my breath here.
Yep.
Yep. I think with that, really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks, Annie, for the comment. Really appreciated the message. If you're listening to this and have your own thoughts or topics to suggest to the show, we'd love to hear it at Uplink Podcast on Twitter or contact at uplinkpodcast.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on a review as well. Completely free. Subscribe wherever you find podcasts. And we'd like to thank Ethan Clark for the beautiful thumbnail. As always, we'll see you on the battlefield.